So Josh Taylor successfully defends his undisputed light welterweight championship with a bizarre 12-round split decision over Jack Catterall. Now, I use the word bizarre, and from that you can probably sense the impression I have of this fight and the verdict. I just want to say, however, I haven't seen anybody else's video or take on this fight. I haven't seen Hatman or G-Man, Boxing on the Edge, Chris Andre. I haven't seen their videos. This is just purely my perception of this fight, my impression of it as I've just watched it and scored it. I want to do a couple of things in this video. I, of course, want to give a round-by-round scorecard and, of course, a score at the end. I also want to touch on some themes that I've highlighted over the course of watching this fight. Some things about the commentary, which link to people's perception of Josh Taylor specifically, but also the strengths and the weaknesses of this performance of both men, of both Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall. So firstly, a round by round breakdown. I gave, and this is going to give away who I thought won the fight, but from rounds 1 to 8, so 1 right through to 8, I gave to Jack Catterall. And of course, he scored a knockdown in the 8th round. The 9th round I had even, so that's 10 either way. Round 10 was, so on the copy of the fight I watched, round 10, or half of round 10 was actually missing. But on that second half, I did have Josh Taylor winning, and I saw that Jack Catterall was deducted a point. So that's 10-8 to Josh Taylor. Round 11 I gave to Taylor. So that's, but at the end of that round, strangely, Taylor had a point deducted. So that's a 9-9 round. And then the 12th round I had to Taylor. So you can hear from that I believe that Catterall won. The actual score I had, if I've calculated this correctly, is 116 to 110 in favour of Jack Catterall. And now it's a tough fight. It's a difficult fight to score because it was a very rough fight. There was a lot of rough housing and headlocks and shoving and punching after the referee said break. But I feel like if you look at all the 12 rounds, the vast majority of the clean, effective, accurate punching came from Jack Catterall. And I mean, that's my opinion. If you disagree, please leave it down below. But yeah, I think this was a clear win for Jack Catterall. And a lot of people, I'm sure they're saying the R word, you know, robbery and stuff like that. And look, for the most part, a lot of rounds in fights like this are open to interpretation. But I have to say, I do feel that Jack Catterall was hard done by. I really do. Because I had him sweeping the first 8 rounds. And now, were they easy rounds? No. But I just felt like he was clearly in control of them. I felt like he was fighting at a pace that he was comfortable fighting at. And Josh Taylor was trying to impose himself, but not with any success. And yeah, you can body up with a guy and you can try and rough him up and push him back. But if you're not landing cleanly on him, but he is on you, you're losing the round. And that's what I saw. I just want to touch on Andre Ward and his... because I'm going to get back to Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall. But Andre Ward, just while it's in my head, I noted down that in the 5th round, the graphic came up on ESPN, because that's the copy of the fight I watched. It was an ESPN copy. He had through the first 4 rounds, he had it 3-1 to Taylor. I strongly disagree. Excuse me. And now typically, in fights like this, the early rounds are open to interpretation, but I didn't see anything from Josh Taylor that made me think that he earned any of those rounds. So I strongly disagreed with Andre Ward earlier, and pretty much through the entirety of this fight, his scorecard was always quite a bit different to mine. And just Andre Ward, I feel like some of the things he said kind of highlights people's perception of Josh Taylor and why it's not necessarily the most accurate. Because Andre Ward asked the question early on in the fight, can Jack Catterall play chess with Josh Taylor? But I was thinking in my head, is Josh Taylor even a chess player? Is he even one of these high IQ boxers who has loads of layers to his game? He's constantly making adjustments, constantly engaging his boxing IQ. Personally, I don't think he is. So when I hear that and I kind of process it with my perception of Josh Taylor, I'm kind of thinking, do people actually know what Josh Taylor does well? And like, I feel like Andre Ward actually contradicted himself, which kind of adds weight to the claim I'm making, which is people don't really understand what Taylor does well. So this is not necessarily verbatim, but I've kind of paraphrased, but you get the message. In round 4, Andre Ward said, Catterall is showing that he can't make the adjustments at the same speed as Taylor. So you can go to round 4 and you can find that. But then in round 5, so this is the next round, Ward is saying Taylor is making this fight harder because Taylor didn't come to box and set things up. So, Andre, which one is it? Is Taylor in this fight, is he just so many leagues above Catterall in terms of tactics and technique that Catterall can't make the adjustments and keep up? Or is Taylor making this fight difficult for himself because he didn't come to box and set things up? That doesn't, in my head, that doesn't make sense. You're either doing one or the other. So yeah, I don't, and this seems unnecessary, but your perception of a fighter it's very true. It can influence the way that you score a fight. Because, say, I've always seen Josh Taylor as not the most skilled, but someone who, he has a very strong will to win. You'll never see any give in Josh Taylor. He's always going for it. And historically, I have to be honest, Jack Catterall, on the other hand, is not someone I've ever been particularly impressed by. I've always felt that he's kind of European level at best. I thought that if he won a world title, he'd actually be overachieving. Whereas here, I think he's really leveled up and shown he's a world level fighter. So I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And so that's kind of what I get from Andre Ward's perception, because I do believe that a lot of people kind of make that mistake about Josh Taylor. I don't think Josh Taylor is a high IQ boxer. I think he's more of he's an athletic guy, of course. He's very brave and he has a lot of fire and intensity, but he's an instinctive fighter. He's an in the moment fighter. He's very experienced, of course. He's got quite a vast amateur background, so there is some polish to his movements, but he's not the kind of fighter that I feel sets things up. I don't know if there's that much culture to his work. From what I've seen of Josh Taylor, if he's behind in a fight or he's in a tough fight, he doesn't add layers to his game. He doesn't make adjustments. He kind of ups the intensity. And if you switch off, because he's got these instincts and this kind of in the moment prowess, that's when he catches you out. Or he'll rough you up and impose himself. He's like one of the biggest guys in the division and he uses that size. But is he a slickster? You know, some people use that word. Is he a slickster? Is he some kind of heir apparent to Mayweather? No, I don't think he is. And Josh Taylor, to get onto the kind of the performance, the strengths and weaknesses, Josh Taylor, as I say, he's got a lot of heart. He's got kind of the intangibles. He's got fighting spirit. He's got athleticism. He's got good movement. But it's weird, he has like the footwork of a long range boxer, but he doesn't have the punches. He doesn't have the hands of a long range boxer. And so I feel like Josh Taylor, he does have some quite considerable holes in his boxing arsenal. And so Ben Davison at one point was asking Josh Taylor for more feints. And okay, I understand the rationale behind that. You know, you're looking to set up your punches, looking to land them effectively. Use feints, okay, that's good. But can Josh Taylor even feint effectively? Because based on the early rounds, I didn't see any effective feinting from him. So is Ben Davison asking Josh Taylor for something that Josh Taylor can't deliver? And now he was feinting, but was he feinting effectively? And I'll give you an example and you can see this yourself. Josh Taylor, when he feints, is almost always on the centre line. And now some people are going to think, that's not bad, is it? Well, it's not going to be bad if you don't really understand what can go wrong. But, so imagine this scenario, you're Josh Taylor and You're trying to feint your opponent, so you're trying to get a reaction from them. But you're on the centre line, so you're a stationary target. What happens if your opponent reacts to that feint with offense and you're not moving anywhere? The likelihood is you're going to feint. Okay, so you successfully got a reaction from your opponent, but your opponent's reacting with offense. You get hit because you're not changing position as you feint, and it's a wasted effort. You're now behind. You've conceded that engagement. That's what Josh Taylor does. He doesn't really understand how to come off the centre line effectively. And you can see it in his fights. You can see it in his offense, in his training. His offense is very centre line heavy. Now, does he come off sometimes? Yeah, but he's not the kind of fighter who can fight on the front foot of his stance, on the back foot, or can move from either one. So you can see his power's limited. His defense isn't that great when he's offending his opponent. And yeah, those are some of the potential issues with it. Jack Catterall, on the other hand, I don't want to say he's got like there's a massive golfing ability, but you can see that Jack Catterall's he's got some slight nuances, some things that he does better than Josh Taylor that really they add up. Excuse me, they add up. I can't speak today, guys. I don't know what's wrong with me. But see, what we'd see from Jack Catterall sometimes is when Josh Taylor would use his feint, his limited feint, he'd go to the back foot of his stance, he'd slip to the back foot, and then from there, he'd then use his unloaded lead hands, because now the weight's in his back leg, and he'd extend it forward as a kind of a probing lead hand, and then he'd throw the left hand from there. So Jack Catterall understands how to go from the centre line to the back foot of his stance, and then back to the front foot through basically a control 2 or a 1-2. So, and now that's relatively basic, but it's something that he does much better than Josh Taylor. And I understand we're getting into some specifics here, but I do really feel that Jack Catterall, he did some things that are quite noteworthy. And however, it's not all good from Jack Catterall, because even though he was very accurate with the straight shots, there was quite little power. And now some people are going to say, oh, what do you mean? He knocked Josh Taylor down in the 8th round with a left hand. What do you mean he has no power? I'm going to get to that. But there's little power there. And a lot of it is because when you watch Jack Catterall, watch him move around the ring as he's throwing his jab. A lot of the time his weight is already on the front leg. And therefore, if he wants to then throw his jab and then his left hand after it, that left hand's not going to have any power in it, because the body weight, his body weight, that's going to be accelerated to generate power through that left hand by going from the back half of his stance, his left leg, to the front half of his stance, his right leg. The weight's already in the right leg. The weight, his body weight, his mass is already in the final position of that punch, so there's not going to be any power in it. However, when he knocked down Josh Taylor in the 8th round, Josh Taylor made a rookie error. He was in a very deep stance, a deep kind of back foot stance, so almost like a crouch. So nearly all of his weight is on the back leg, his left leg, which the back foot, you know, everyone's done it on pads. Where does the pad man hold it when he wants you to throw a backhand? He'll hold it, say if you're in the same stance, he'll hold it to the back half of his stance. That's where Josh Taylor is. He's in the trajectory of Jack Catterall's left hand. So he's in this deep position. He's lower than Jack Catterall. So when Jack Catterall throws that punch, he has some slight aid from gravity to increase the impact. But also Josh Taylor's lowered his lead glove, his right glove. So not only is he in the trajectory of that punch, but he has no defense, not even a passive guard, and he's lower than the trajectory of the punch in terms of the trajectory is going downwards, aided by gravity, and that's why he gets knocked down. It's really that simple. But these are errors that the undisputed light welterweight champion is making. It just goes to show that everyone can get better in some way. Another thing that Jack Catterall did quite well was he did a good job of finishing his combinations. If it was a 1-2, or if it was a 1-2-3 or a 4-punch combination, he'd finish the combination by extending his lead hand or jabbing or controlling with his lead hand, usually into Josh Taylor's face. And now some people are going to say, oh, it's a stiff arm control, oh, it's a jab. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a lead hand control after you finish landing your punches to control your opponent. In the case of putting it in their face, you can blind them, but you can also use it as leverage to then leave that engagement as your opponent looks to start their offense. That's something that Jack Catterall did very well. And I'm wondering if that was influenced from him being around the Mayweathers, because this is something I didn't actually know. Is that Jack Catterall, was a young boxer, was sparring with Canelo and Floyd Mayweather, I believe. And so I can't remember if it was Roger Mayweather or Floyd Mayweather Sr., but there's a video of them on one of the boxing websites, probably a boxing channels, probably Fight Hype or Fight Hub or ES News. And, he's like, when trainers, they drop gems in like a video and stuff. One of them was saying that end your combinations with the jab. And you can see this in their pad work as well when they do the routines with a lot of their fighters, not just Floyd, but they have, loads of punches, loads of head movement and slips, but they finish their combinations with a jab. It's that same thing. You finish your combination on a jab and you pull out the engagement, and you get to safety while controlling your opponent, keeping them where they are. So, these are just some technicalities, but as I say, I feel like Jack Catterall really upped his game in this and showed me some tools that I didn't think he had. He did start to look a bit ragged in the late rounds, so maybe the conditions there, but he fought the early rounds, the first 8, so well. I didn't give Josh Taylor any. Josh Taylor, I feel like he has to go back to the drawing board. He's going to have to... And look, I don't want to rag on him because, look, he became undisputed champion, even though people who have watched my channel and have spoken to me about boxing, they know that I felt Regis Prograis actually beat Josh Taylor by a couple of rounds. But nevertheless, Josh Taylor is undisputed champion. However, he still has things that he needs to improve on. And I feel like this goes to show it. So, last point. I don't know if this really makes a difference, but many people are complaining about the referee, especially on the ESPN telecast. They were constantly having a go at the referee, saying, "Ref, why are you jumping in? Why are you jumping in?" I didn't really have, for the most part, I didn't really have a problem with the way the referee ref the fight. But I do feel, cause like when you watch this fight, there's many times when both Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor hit after the referee says break. Like one of them's in a clinch, referee says break, the other one goes to punch him, and the referee warns him. That's the referee's job. If the referee says break and you hit your opponent or try to hit him after he says break, the referee's going to warn you. And the referee gave plenty of warnings throughout the fight. But that being said, I do have an issue with the way the referee took the points off. I can't say about when he took the point off from Jack Catterall because I didn't see that. That wasn't in the copy of the fight that I was watching. But with the Josh Taylor one, he kind of waited to the end of the round and then took a point off Josh Taylor. That's what I saw anyway, and I thought that was a little bit off. So, but for the most part, like 90% of the referee's performance, I didn't have an issue with. If you got a rough fight like this, the referee's going to be in it a lot. And that's what it was. It was a rough fight. But I'm going to stop waffling on about this fight because this video is nearly 20 minutes long. I didn't think it'd be this long. But personally, I want to see a rematch. And now, historically, I'm not a massive fan of immediate rematches. However, 2 reasons. Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor, where are they really going to go next? You know, all the belts are on the line in this fight. So it's not like there's another champion that one of them can go on from fight. But also, I do feel like Jack Catterall's performance warrants a rematch because I personally feel he was hard done by. That's just my opinion, however. We'll have to see what happens next. Let me know your opinion of this fight. Jeez, 19 and a half minutes so far. Let me know. Leave it all down below in the comment section. I'll get back to you. If you could like, comment, share, subscribe, be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.